I think Julian is absolutely right. I detect no enthusiasm at all on the part of Southern Water to start adding this chemical to the tap water. They've got nothing at all to gain from this, and yet, you know, it's a massive responsibility that they're taking on here. I think, as with most campaigns, there's a sort of a campaign that is out there in the public, but there's normally a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that people don't know about, and maybe, you know, I might be suggesting to Stephen that a reminder to Southern Water that their priorities at this time should be more about making sure everybody's got enough water at this time of drought, and you know, that's recently been announced, and we're likely to have problems now for several months, and just so that they concentrate their energies on supplying everybody with water and not to be distracted on this separate issue. As with the legal challenges, it could be something that could very successfully delay it from ever happening.
There's other people, Jenny. I think the first one is Sue at the back.
My name's Sue Murray. Going back to the legislation, I didn't hear all of what the lady at the front said, but the thing that's always concerned me in all of this is the fact that somebody somewhere wanted us to have fluoride so badly that they came up with this amendment to the Water Act to tie it all up, to indemnify the water companies and almost blackmailing them into putting it in the water supply, and the fact that it says that you have to consult with the public, but that you don't have to necessarily listen to what the public have to say, which is a farce in itself. And the other thing that concerns me is that consulting with people is very democratic, but it's only as good as the way it is put across to people, and information can be manipulated. Quite a lot of the information you see of the pro-fluoride devotees, the British Fluoridation Society, for example, if you read anything there, they start off by saying calcium fluoride is naturally occurring in rivers, and then they're going to say we add fluoride to the water supply. So anyone who doesn't take the trouble or wants to investigate further, they assume that what is going into the water supply as an additive is the same as the natural product. And this is what can happen with any consultation, whether it's to do with the water supply or anything else. That is the thing that concerns me. And what you said at the beginning, the fact that dental health has improved dramatically, which is their reason for wanting to put fluoride in the water in the first place, you go back and think, well, hang on a minute, if it's improved, you don't need it now anyway. But they're sticking to their guns 3 years later on this time, money and expertise to push something through that everybody, well, most people don't want. And I've heard people say that they're sticking to their guns because they don't want to lose face. I mean, for goodness sake. All they've got to do is look up and say, in the economic climate as it is, we've decided that it isn't viable to spend any more money on this, so we have decided to leave it alone. They won't lose face, but they stick to their guns. And I find that very disturbing, that after all this, and as Spiros quite rightly said, we shouldn't even be in this position in the first place. It's wonderful that people get together and do this, but the legality of it, the fact that we've still got this legal document in the background that could be used as a template for other things in the future, so that if anybody wants to put through anything, really, they can come up with some legal document which has similar wording to the Water Act, but for a different purpose. Now that I find very disturbing. So, all I can say is.
I'd just like to make a further comment on that. This whole issue of taxpayers' money, if you think about it, the government decides that they want to push something. They take our money and then they use our money to propagandize about the benefits of something. And then people like Stephen and his merry band of men and women volunteers are trying to fight this juggernaut which has got unlimited amounts of money coming from us, in fact, to convince us. It's a one-sided thing. Even if this debate was fair, they've got £500,000 to convince us of the benefits. There's no one in opposition, like we're told, democratic process, we should have two parties to voice it. The opposition, we have no funds. Thank God we've got the Echo, really, that has carried the voice of the people, not even our voice. Otherwise, who's going to listen to us? It's very unfair how they're taking our money and using it against us.
But the only thing I would say, partly in response to that, is do not underestimate the common sense of the British people. The phrase "the silent majority" is a bit hackneyed, but it's nevertheless true. And I'm not going to mention specific issues. If I were, I would mention issues like Europe or unilateral nuclear disarmament or various other things, but I'm not going to mention
all of which we agree on.
I'm not going to mention them. But seriously, I've been relieved over many years in politics now to see, for example, there was a time when the whole of the political establishment, let's choose a relatively uncontroversial one like the euro, because most people now accept that we're lucky we're not in the single currency, and I don't want to get into party politics, but the fact is there was a time at the time when it was being thought, should we join the single currency or shouldn't we, where the whole of the political establishment and a mass of the media were all pushing this line, and yet whenever you took non-pejoratively worded opinion poll questions to the public came back with a steady majority against it. And I think the very fact that despite everything that is said about the one-sided propaganda on fluoride, the fact is, as far as we can tell, over 70% of the people were still against it. So don't be depressed. That's all I'm saying. What you say is absolutely true. There is one-sided propaganda. Propaganda is very good if it reinforcing things that people believe already. Propaganda is not all that good at changing people's minds if they have already had the good sense and the common sense to have a different opinion. A lot of it just washes over them, and for that we have to be very grateful indeed.
We've got two hands. Hazel was first, and there's a gentleman at the back there, so Hazel.
I want to ask a question about the actual concentrated fluoride in terms of the country is really toxic substances, which sort of like through time like concrete, glass, etc. And I'm aware that where this substance will go, places like the waterworks at Eastleigh, and they were actually thinking of, and Mary Skill, in fact, had a dosing station at Baker's Drone in Rannings, which is like within a couple of hundred yards of the Cedar School, which is a school for disabled children. It just seemed to me, at that stage, it's a hugely and highly dangerous process. And I wondered if there was any requirement of councils to actually have, before it is introduced, to have actually drafted an emergency response, which they will have in the case of any potential accident. Because it does seem to me that it's just too hazardous. I know with nuclear ships that is coming into Southampton, there has to be an emergency response that a council can put into action if there is any danger. And I wonder if in this particular case, I know that all sorts of dangerous chemicals come into Southampton, but this does seem in where the chemicals go and in its nature, it is actually different to anything that we've got so far. So,
Okay, do you want to?
Yes, I can answer that in the generality, and that is that councils, other authorities like the Environment Agency, are constantly monitoring risk, and there are all sorts of risks, aren't they? If the airport decides to change a flight pattern, or a multitude of different risks arise, and you have to have people looking at the level of risk, the possible consequence of that risk, and working out contingency plans about mitigating that risk, but what you do if the worst happens. And I'm sure that if the water fluoridation scheme does go ahead, your local authorities will have due regard to that, just as the Environment Agency would do. But I'm not at all reassured by that, because I think there are risks here which are almost incalculable because of the very nature of what we're doing, which is for goodness sake, they're putting it in the tap water.
Right. There may be a point our city councillors want to take up. I think, gentlemen, is it Mr. Large? I can't see that far back. It's a bit dark.
My name's Ron. I'm 82 years old. I've worked for the Water Board for 40 odd years, and I've quite a long bit of subject. But if referring back to the two gentlemen at the Gardens Peckham, the sewage works, they're upstream of Portsmouth Water Company intake at West End. So if the fluoridation is not diluted, and Portsmouth Water Company takes their millions of gallons of water a day out of the river at West End, and it's then stored at a big reservoir at Wickham. My point is that if Portsmouth are going to be affected by this, if the water cannot, fluoridation cannot be diluted, I embrace Portsmouth water people, because I've been Saint supporter since 1944, and I would willingly embrace the Portsmouth people to come and join us against this fight. But on a more serious note, you might have noticed a few days ago on the television there was a large diameter water main burst and it flooded several properties. And if that's the case, and that is fluorinated water, what is the seriousness of those people living in those properties going to be suffering for years for poisoning? And that's it. Thank you.
There's a gentleman there who hasn't spoken. So.
And I'm joining congratulations to the very much so far, and say that I'm a physicist and a businessman.
Can you just speak up a little, please?
As a physicist and a businessman, there's some other arguments which I could bring to bear alongside all of the wonderful moral, legal, religious arguments. But the argument that I like to bring to bear is as a student of human behaviour. And my observation is that the children in my family, when they clean their teeth, use a proprietary toothpaste, and they gargle and rinse and spit. And the amount of water that they actually drink is minimal. They drink milkshakes, they drink Coca-Cola, they don't drink tea. I myself drink 8 or 10 pints of water a day. So we've got this whole thing which is built on the dubious moral argument, the dubious argument of the medication for children and their teeth and God knows and not going to another kid. But it actually won't help. And I don't think the people who are promoting this live in the real world. They must be aliens or reptiles. None of the children I ever see drink water. So what the hell is this all about?
I mean, I think that's a good point. And it is actually worth saying that less than 2% of the water that will be fluoridated will be drunk anyway. The other 98% goes in all kinds of different places.
How much would be drunk by children?
Ah, good question. Any more? Anybody who hasn't had a chance to speak first? Is a lady here who hasn't had a chance to.
I'm Jill Holloway and I'm from Locks Heath. And my concern was, have they started doing anything up at, what's it called, Chilworth? Chilworth Fortresses? What's the water? Otterbourne. Yeah, so I sent an email to Otterbourne, and when I was contacted, I was given a telephone number which I called, and it was the SHA I was speaking to. So the Waterworks didn't talk to me at all. I explained my concern. Are you doing anything up there? Have you started? And she said, no, nothing's happened yet. She said, and you will know because the Daily Echo constantly keeps tabs on them. And that's so,
well done. Interesting that the water company itself is so reticent, which again fits in with our general belief that they're not pushing this at all particularly.
David, you haven't had a chance.
Maybe a little more. Shirley. It strikes me that the Strategic Health Authority displayed a frightening level of incompetence from start to finish in the fact that they still haven't got a clue how they're going to implement this. And presumably that level of incompetence spreads to all other areas of work that they're involved in. And if that's the case, then please bring it on to us so that we can continue to apply more pressure to the SHA, because they are making life and death decisions about the health of people in this area.
Well,
they're clearly not fit for purpose.
Well, I actually have a lot of sympathy with that view, and I say that it comes back to the fact that these people they're not capable of being held to account. And some of you may know that I've been having a very, very similar fight with a not dissimilar organisation called Southern Health NHS Foundation Trust, which is in the process of closing 35% of the acute adult mental health inpatient beds on the basis of claims that these beds are not being used, whereas I have absolutely 101% reliable information from within the system that these beds are constantly being used, and that on the very day that this information was being given to Hampshire County Council of supposedly 20 to 30 vacant beds, there were in fact no male beds, no female beds, and only 9 what are called leave beds, which means beds that are empty for 3 or 4 nights at most, which might enable you to admit perhaps 4, perhaps 5 people at most, while people are temporarily away. And this is a problem which is endemic to unelected bureaucracies of this sort. They simply don't make the effort because they know that normally their jobs don't depend on it. Now, the people who are sitting on this particular body, their jobs didn't depend on it. It looks as if their jobs are going to go, although I'll bet you those individuals crop up somewhere else in the system before too long. But that is why the fact that it's being handed over to the democratic local authorities means that we can all have our say, and that even the people who support fluoridation will have to give real regard to what the people believe before they dare to implement it.
I can take a couple more. Elaine.
Mary Williams, just a thought. Couldn't local councils delay things by refusing planning permission for the dosing stations? There must be loads of ways of delaying because of various health and safety risks and things like that. You could delay for a year, surely.
So do you want to take that as a council issue?
It's a good idea, I'll take it away. Of course, you cannot influence a plan application until such time as it's made, but if it means that the record of New Forest District Council not quite being up to the mark in terms of how it services planning applications suffers for 1 year, I will not be too upset.
Good.
I think it's important that people, particularly in Southampton City, actually take up this issue with their local councillors, because although the council in September voted to oppose it, actually all things could change come the local elections in May. There was quite a large body of councillors who actually abstained from the vote. So I think if it is an important issue to people, they should definitely let their prospective councillor know that it is an important issue, and they will be judged on that one issue.
I am going to take just 2 more, and I just see 2 hands at the back, and I know you've both spoken previously, but as there are no other hands up, then Maria and
Okay, my point's been covered.
Right, fine, just Maria, I'm going to let you have the last word, which I should never do to a politician.
Well, I'm an inspiring politician. 2 points, one question. First point I wanted to make was going back to the issue of babies and formula milk. It's very interesting. Research I did, I found out that breast milk actually filters out fluoride. So obviously babies are not meant to be having this fluoride. Second point I wanted to make was the lady was talking about the fact that it's
a bit ironic that we might be fighting here and win, and yet other fights might sprout up around the country. Excuse me for my ignorance, but has there been an e-petition put up for debating the whole fluoride issue around the country? And if there hasn't, maybe that's an option to also get it highlighted in the media. And then I've got a question for you, Stephen.
Okay.
Children now, I believe, are having something like 12 to 15 vaccinations before they actually reach adulthood. And of course, a lot of senior citizens in this country, and people who are vulnerable with illnesses like diabetes, respiratory illnesses, etc., are having flu vaccinations. Whilst we're pumping all this stuff into us, and the thimerosal and mercury to preserve all these vaccinations, has any research been done as to the effect of how the chemical, the fluoridated water, interacts with all these wonderful things we're putting in our bodies?
Well, I'm going to answer two bits of that. The first point, just on the kind of first aspect about, I kind of forgot what I'm going to say now.
It's the fluoride.
I'll answer a lot of it. I mean, the simple answer about research is that there is insufficient research. What we tend to have are lots of animal or very small studies, but what you don't get is substantive follow-up research studies. So you get lots of studies which indicate that there are problems with fluoride, and a lot of that's even from molecular level, so looking at the impact of fluoride on cells, proteins and things, right through to the kind of compound, and Jennifer Luke's work, for example, which Arshad mentioned, looking at accumulation of fluoride within the body, or Vassin's work looking at osteosarcoma. Where's the follow-up research? It has not been done, which means every time someone does a review, they say, there are some safety concerns here. What we need is more research. Who funds that research? The only research the current government is funding to do with water fluoridation is actually to look at the extent of dental fluorosis. There's actually one thing we know. Water fluoridation causes dental fluorosis. I can list hundreds of studies which show that relationship. So why spend another several £100,000 proving something we already know? So the research is not done. I think that's and the basic research, the human research, is just not done. And just to kind of cap it all, if you try and publish research which is contrary to water fluoridation in two of the leading dental journals, it will not be published because the editors are pro-water fluoridation, therefore they will not publish things which counter water fluoridation in any way whatsoever, not even question it, not even whatever, because unfortunately that's just the way some things work. So that's the research question. Yeah, the e-petition. There have been a number of attempts to put an e-petition up right through from when the previous government introduced the number 10 petition. I think it's fair to say that if you go to anywhere in the country and start talking about fluoridation, most people would be totally unaware, not interested on it. And that was probably true in Southampton about 4 years ago. But when you have something introduced and it becomes a local issue, then people generate, and we can get 15,000 signatures very, very easily against water fluoridation. But nationally, of course, it's much, much more difficult because, people are not. But I mean, it's something that's been tried. It's been tried. We tried to put it up to 38 degrees and it's not been taken up. And so it is quite difficult to kind of build a kind of a national platform. But I think, awareness, recently, if we go back to the issue around the SHA and local authorities, the Northwest region abandoned any progress towards water fluoridation because of the difficulties, the cost, and because the Strategic Health Authority was being abolished. So I think it's one of those things that go up and down, but it's actually quite difficult to generate, and we've tried before. We do have links with other groups around the country, and we also have links with other groups abroad. But it is a difficult one to kind of build a national platform on. I just wish we were more like Scotland, where they said no to water fluoridation and yes to doing much more comprehensive community targeted based. The Child Smart programme is an amazing thing in Scotland. It's cut dental decay in Scotland, which was quite bad, and it's a lifelong, and Dave was talking about how you do lifelong things with children. It's exactly what they're doing. So if you really want to avoid it, let's all move to Scotland. I'm going to stop there. First of all, I'd just like to thank our panel of speakers for giving up time and coming here and facing an unknown questioning audience, maybe even an unknown audience, because we said we weren't sure. So thank you very much to David, Julian and Arshad. As importantly, I'd like to thank you, because of course it wouldn't be any use having a panel if we didn't have an audience. So thank you for your continued interest, support and involvement. And I'm just going to plug the postcard again, because this is, as I said, you know, it may not make much difference. We know the SHO ignore anything they don't like the look of or want to take in. But I think it's important. If we can get thousands of cards sent back to the SHA, it's just going to irritate them. And, you know, that's a good thing as far as I'm concerned. So pick up cards, give them to your friends, sign them, get them to sign them, get them to post them. And let's kind of flood the SHA if we possibly can. So thanks once again to everybody. But not fluoridate, yes.
Absolutely.